Hello everyone. Welcome to Unacademy, India's largest online learning platform. Let's crack UPSC CSC English. Now, before I start the session, let me introduce myself for the people who are new on the platform. My name is Alok Oja. I've done my engineering from Pune. I have been associated with the field of UPSC since past 7 years. I have been through various stages of civil services exam. I hold the experience of giving CDS SSB twice. I also hold the experience of exams like CAPF Assistant Commandant and Uttar Pradesh PSC. I am involved into the field of teaching since past 5 years and I have mentored more than 15,000 aspirants for UPSC. Now, prelims is around the corner. It's approximately around, it's on 27th of June. Now we need to have a very targeted approach towards the prelims. Now many a times there have been questions that is raised in the mind of an aspirant like what should we read actually for the prelims and what sort of questions have been asked in the prelims exam by UPSC. So now to cater these needs of UPSC, I am focusing upon this video, and in this video basically you'll come to know what all aspects that you need to focus for prelims, basically for the perspective of ancient India. Now before I start, there might be question in the mind of an aspirant why one should prefer Unacademy as a platform for online learning. So here are the ample of reasons why one should prefer Unacademy as a platform for online learning. First of all, you'll have daily life classes on the Unacademy platform. Unacademy offers you assimilation of top and dynamic educators of India on a single platform. You can directly interact with the educators, you can clear all sorts of doubts with the educators. Second most important aspect that we need to focus upon is building up competence or competitiveness. Now, why competence or competitiveness is important? Each year, approximately around 1 million aspirants aspire to become an IAS officer, but hardly 800 to 1000 make it to the final list. So one need to understand here that one aspirant is competing with 800 to 1000 other aspirant, and in that case one needs to build up that sort of competence or competitiveness, and Unacademy helps to build up your competence by going through live tests and quizzes. All the courses on Unacademy platform are highly structured in nature, and there is a proper timetable through which the courses are being conducted, and one can have unlimited access to the courses on Unacademy platform. Here are the few top and dynamic educators of India from whom you are going to learn through. Now, Unacademy covers the syllabus in a very comprehensive manner. There is complete focus on all the aspects and subjects of civil services like history, geography, polity, economics, science and technology, current affairs, proper answer writing techniques. Along with that, there is also focus on the optional subject. Like wide range of optional subjects have been covered basically from the humanities part to the part of literature. Now there is also something called as iconic subscription. Now what is majorly iconic subscription all about? Now during the initial days, the preparation is completely haphazard because an aspirant is new and is completely confused about where should I start my preparation from? What sources should I prefer? Which NCERT should I read? What is the importance of Tamil Nadu State Board book? How much time should be dedicated to read the newspaper or cover the current affairs? What government magazines should I read? What is the importance of answer writing technique? So there would be a mentor who would be guiding you throughout your journey for civil services preparation. So if you choose me as your mentor, please use my code AKOUS. I repeat the code AKOUS. Now, Unacademy has also come up with Unacademy Combat, which is on 31st of Jan 2021. Previously, it was held on 17th of Jan 2021, and the contest format is like 45-minute, 60 questions, 13 combat, which is divided into 6 sections, and there would be a relative scoring, so that one can easily gauge his preparation. And it is a fortnightly contest. Rank 1 to 3, he would be getting 3 months, basically GS plus subscription, and rank 4 to 150 would be getting rupees 1000 Amazon vouchers. New batches are starting for 1 year, 2 years and 3 years, which are being run by the top educators on the Unacademy. Please have a look at these batches. Now probably there have been an iconic subscription hike from 25th of Jan. So if anyone who is aspiring to go for an iconic subscription, then they can go before 25th of Jan because there can be a probable hike in the iconic subscription. These have been the special classes conducted by me previously. So to avail 10% discount on your subscription, please use my code AKOUS. I repeat the code AKOUS. Now let's get started with a discussion of the syllabus and let us understand on which major aspects we need to focus upon and what sort of questions can be asked in the UPSC prelims exam. Now let us get started with the first topic, that is prehistoric culture. Okay, now pay attention properly. Hold on for a second, guys. Okay. Now, what sort of questions have been asked in the exam and what approach we need to develop? First of all, please go through all the sites of prehistoric culture. Now, I'll give you a very small example. It is said that humans appeared for the first time on the earth in the form of apes, and their backbone was highly inclined. But with the passage of time, their backbone started getting erect, and such humans are referred as Homo erectus. Again, with the passage of time, it is said that the size of the body started decreasing and the size of the brain started increasing. The humans started using their brains for various activities, and such humans are referred as Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens means a thinking man because these people developed stone tools. They discovered fire. So, Homo sapien resembles a thinking man. And all these things occurred in Pleistocene age. Now, it is further divided into four major ages, that is Paleolithic age, Mesolithic age, Neolithic age, and Chalcolithic age. Now, in the Paleolithic age, it is said that there was discovery of stone tool because humans required something for, like basically tearing apart the skin of the animal, chopping the meat of the animal, then digging the pits so that they can hide themselves from the wild animals. So that there was development of stone tools during the Paleolithic age. Then comes Mesolithic age. The humans started domesticating animals during the Mesolithic age. And the first, what we say, animal to be domesticated was a wild dog. And the evidence of animal domestication for the first time came from Palestine in Israel. And in India, it came from a site called as Adamgarh, which is located in Hoshangabad district of Madhya Pradesh. And this thing occurred in the Mesolithic age. Bone ornaments came in Mesolithic age. Human skeleton was found in Mesolithic age. Painting became polychrome, means more than one color were used, and this occurred in the Mesolithic age. And there are many sites which are associated with the Mesolithic age. Then comes Neolithic age. Now what happened? Initially the people were heavily dependent upon the tools that are made up of stone. So they were living near the hilly areas. Now with the passage of time, these humans started moving towards the plain areas because now they have started practicing agriculture. And now it is said that there was development of agriculture in the Neolithic age. Now there is one of the most developed agricultural site was Mehergarh, which is located in present day Pakistan. Another important aspect that we need to understand here is Neolithic age saw the development of pottery. Now it is said that when there was development of agriculture, people required something for cooking, eating, drinking and storing the food grains. So they developed pots. And the earliest evidence of pottery comes from Chopani Mando in Uttar Pradesh. Now there is another striking feature of Neolithic age. There is a site called as Burzahom which is located in Kashmir. What is the most striking feature of the site Burzahom? The master and the dog both were buried in the same grave. This is one of the most striking feature of the Neolithic site, that is Burzahom. And there are many more Neolithic sites located in different parts of India, like Giyak and Karakiari in Ladakh, Kuchai and Golbai Sasan in Odisha, Payyapalli in Tamil Nadu, and there are many more such sites. Then comes Chalcolithic age. The first metal to be discovered by man was copper. Chalco means copper and lithic means stone. Although copper was discovered, the man did not abandon stone. So basically, these are the striking features that you need to focus upon when you are reading the prehistoric culture. Apart from the striking feature, one also needs to remember the important site associated with each age. Hope so you understood what approach we need to develop for prehistoric culture. Moving further. Like, consider the following statement about Neolithic age. It saw the development of agriculture. Giak and Kiari are Neolithic sites in Odisha. Which statement is correct? Yes, my friends, please boggle up your minds. I've just talked about this. My friends, only statement number 1 is correct. The reason behind Giak and Kiari are the Neolithic sites not in Odisha but in Ladakh. So only statement number 1 is correct. Now after that, the most important topic that we need to focus upon is Indus Valley civilization. Now listen to me very carefully. There were 4 contemporary civilizations in the world which developed around 4th millennium BC. That is around 4000 BC. And all these, what we say, civilizations are located along the banks of some or the other river. For example, Mesopotamian civilization, which covers present-day Central Asia, is located along the banks of Tigris and Euphrates River. Chinese civilization is located along the banks of Wangho or Yellow River. Egyptian civilization is located along the banks of the longest river of the world, that is River Nile. And Indus Valley civilization, the name itself speaks, it is located along the banks of River Indus. Now, what is the extent of Indus Valley civilization? If we have an aerial view of the Indus Valley civilization, it looks roughly triangular in shape. The northernmost site of Indus Valley civilization is Manda, which is in Jammu and Kashmir. The southernmost site is Daimabad, which is in Maharashtra. The easternmost site is Alamgirpur, which is located on the banks of River Hindon in western UP. And the westernmost site is Sukta Gendor, which is located on Pakistan-Iran border. As I have told you, it looks roughly triangular in shape and covers approximately around 8,50,000 square kilometers. Okay. Another important thing. The main road are considerably wider in comparison to the side lanes and alleys. The side lanes or alleys are cutting the main road at 90 degree at right angle. Then the houses lay within the side lanes. The well lay between the two houses. The well is made up of burnt brick. The main door of houses are not street facing. They are located in the side. There are more number of doors in comparison to the windows. Houses are made up of wood and burnt bricks. There is a vertical drainage as well as horizontal drainage. The drains are covered by stone slabs. This simply means that people were aware about hygiene. Okay? Now, this comes under basic typology. What sort of questions can appear in the exam? Consider the following statement about Indus Valley civilization. The houses are street facing. First statement. There are more number of windows in comparison to the door. Second statement. Which among the following statements are correct? My friends, both the statements are wrong. So these sorts of questions can be encountered in the exam. And the sources from where you can cover Indus Valley civilization is Tamil Nadu State Board Book 11th Standard and the NCRT. Now there can be questions on important sites of Indus Valley civilization. There are 3 major aspects that you need to remember about any site of Indus Valley civilization. Where is the site located in the present day? It is located along the banks of which river? And what are the important findings from that place? I'll give you a very small example. Pay attention properly. Mohenjo-daro. Mohenjo-daro is a site which is located in present day Pakistan on the banks of river Indus. It was discovered in 1922 by Rakhaldas Banerjee, R.D. Banerjee. It is said that the city might have been destroyed by flood. That is why Mohenjo-daro means mound of dead. There was a multi-pillared assembly hall found at this site. It might be a temple or a meeting place for nearby village assembly. Secondly, ivory weight balance was found here, which simply means that people were aware about weights and measures. Bronze image of a nude dancing girl was found at the site of Mohenjo-daro. Statite image of a bearded man. So probably he might be a priest. Okay. All these are then seal of Pashupati Mahadev. A Pashupati Mahadev is sitting there and he's surrounded by few animals like tiger, elephant, bull, buffalo, and two deer are seated near the feet. So these are the important findings from the site of Mohenjo-daro. What sort of questions can be encountered here? The bronze image of a nude dancing girl was found from the site of Mohenjo-daro. Mohenjo-daro is the second Indus Valley site to be discovered. Which statement is correct? My friends, both the statements are correct. So please study all the important sites of Indus Valley civilization because each one of them are very, very important from the exam perspective. There can also be the question on varied aspects of the society. I will give you a very, very small example. Script of Indus Valley civilization. The script of Indus Valley civilization is still undeciphered. Undeciphered means no one knows what is written. We only know through the pictures, or we have inferred it through the pictures. The script is referred as Boustrophodon. Means it is written from right to left in the first line, left to right in the second line, and so on. You can find Indus Valley script on copper seal, on copper tablets. You can find it on the buildings, but you cannot find the script on the bricks. This is a very striking feature. This is a very exceptional feature, and this can be asked in the exam. I'll give you a very small example. One more question, which strike my mind right now. There was a statement in the UPSC prelims exam. Indus Valley civilization is horse-centered. My friends, this is a wrong statement. Because horse is not a native animal of India. It is a native animal of Central Asia. So Indus Valley civilization is not at all horse-centered. So these are the important aspects that you guys need to focus on Indus Valley civilization. Now, question on Indus Valley religion. It was secular and polytheistic. They believed in animism. Animism means love and respect for nature. Both the statements are correct. Because these people worship trees, animals, snakes and birds. So this will come under animism, that is love and worship of nature. So both the statements are correct, my friends. Hope so you understood what approach you need to develop for Indus Valley civilization. You guys need to focus upon these sorts of questions. Vedic civilization. Pay attention properly. Now, various historians have different views about the decline of Indus Valley civilization. Few historians believe that Indus Valley civilization was destroyed by earthquake. Few believe that it was destroyed by flooding. Few believe that there was change in the course of river, that is why the Indus Valley civilization was destroyed. But one of the most logical and widely accepted theory is Aryan invasion theory or Max Muller theory. And what is this theory all about? There were certain tribes of Central Asia which entered into India through Khyber Pass, which is located in Hindu Kush mountain on the borders of India and Afghanistan. Now when they entered into India, they started subjugating the local people of India. They came up with horses, they came up with iron, they came up with sophisticated iron weapons and technology. And the natives of India were unable to meet these challenges. And they moved towards southern part of India. So the people who settled in the northern part of India came to be referred as Aryan. And those who settled in the southern part of India came to be referred as Dravidian. Now, this theory is referred as Aryan invasion theory. Now, my friends, I have one question. If Indus Valley civilization was destroyed by earthquake, if Indus Valley civilization was destroyed by flooding, whom did the Aryans subjugate then? So, Aryan invasion theory is one of the most widely accepted theory. And where do we come to know about the Aryans from? We come to know about the Aryans from the Vedas. And the word Ved has been derived from Vidya, that is knowledge. So Rig Ved, Samved, Yajurved and Atharva Ved are the important Veds. What sort of question can be asked here? Please listen to me carefully. Rig Ved. Rig Ved means praising the deity. It is divided into 10 mandal. Mandal 1 and 10 speaks about the origin of universe. Mandal 2 to 7 is referred as family book. One can find the mention of famous Gayatri mantra in Mandal 3 of Rig Ved. Out of 1028 hymns, 250 hymns are dedicated to Indra, that is god of strength, god of war, god of rain. 200 hymns are dedicated to Agni, that is god of fire. 120 hymns are dedicated to Som, that is god of plants and intoxicants. And a separate mandal has been dedicated to Som, that is mandal 9. In mandal 10 of Purusha Sukta, one can find the mention of Varna system or caste system. Then, the Brahman associated with Rig Ved are Aitareya and Kaushtaki Brahman. The word Ashwa has been mentioned for 315 times in Rig Ved. Ashwa means horse. The word Gau has been mentioned for 176 times in Rig Ved. Gau means cow. So what sort of questions can come up from Rig Ved? Consider the following statement. The Indra and Agni have been given prominence in Rig Ved. First statement. Mandal 9 is dedicated to Som, that is god of water. Which statement is correct? My friends, only statement number 1 is correct. Because Som is god of plant or intoxicants and not of water. Okay? Then what is Aranyaka? Aranyakas are forest book and it is also called as book of Rahasya. Who is going to explain these secrets or Rahasya to us? It is the Guru who is going to explain this Rahasya or secret to us. And all these secrets have been revealed in Upanishad. Upanishad basically means sitting near the Guru's feet to gain knowledge. Totally there are 108 Upanishad, out of which 11 are the most important ones and are referred as Mukhya Upanishad. I'll give you a few examples. Like our national motto is Satyameva Jayate Nanritam, which has been derived from Mundaka Upanishad. Mandukya Upanishad is the shortest among all. Transmigration of soul or karma doctrine has been mentioned in Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. Brihad Aranyaka and Chandogya Upanishad are the oldest Upanishad. During the medieval period, there was a Mughal prince whose name was Dara Shikoh. He is credited with what we say translating more than 50 Upanishads into Persian. Okay, so Upanishads are very important. Then we are going to study about Upaved, Vedang. Like I'll give you a very small example, Siksha and Vyakran. Siksha means correct pronunciation of mantra. But when there can be a correct pronunciation of the mantra? When there is a specific and correct grammar associated with it. And the first book on Sanskrit grammar was written by Panini, that is Ashtadhyayi, which is composed of 8 chapters. Now, there can be probable question on comparison of the Vedic society. I'll give you a very small example. Now, Vedic period encompasses the what we say time frame from 1500 to 600 BC, but it is divided into 2 parts: 1500 to 1000 BC, which is early Vedic period, and 1000 to 600 BC, which is later Vedic period. During early Vedic period, sati system was absent. Child marriage was absent. Women were allowed to participate in the village assembly like Sabha, Samiti, Gan, Vidhata. Vidhata is the most, ancient assembly of the Aryans. And it has been mentioned for 122 times in Rig Ved. Caste system was prevalent but was not rigidly followed. And in the later Vedic society, there was drastic change in the dignity of women. Sati became prevalent. Child marriage was prevalent. Caste system was very rigidly followed. Women were denied education. They were denied inheritance of the property. So all these were the drastic changes. Okay, so please go through the comparison of early and later Vedic societies on the social aspect, political aspect, and religious aspect, because there can be a probable question in the exam on these Vedic terminologies. Please read all the terminology. I'll give you a few examples. Now, barley was referred as yava, rice was referred as akshat or tandul or vrihi. Wheat was referred as godhum. Sugarcane was referred as ikshu. Copper was referred as ayas. Iron was referred as Sham Ayas or Krishna Ayas. Duhitri, it is a terminology which is used for daughter. So please go through all the terminologies. All the terminologies are very important from exam perspective, and time and again there have been questions in the exam on the various terminologies. Now here are the terminology. Now during the early Vedic period, land was not the most important form of wealth. The cattle was the most important form of wealth, and person having lot many cattle was considered as the wealthiest person, and he was referred as Gomat. So Gomat is a wealthy person. Godhuli means it is a measurement of time. You might have heard the word Godhuli Bela, that is measurement of time. So please go through all the terminologies. All the terminologies are very important from exam perspective, and there can be the question on these terminologies. So hope so you understood that what all aspects do we need to focus upon the Vedic period. Okay guys, moving further with Mahajanpad. Try to break this etymology. Mahajanpad. Maha, great. Janpad, foothold of a tribe. Wherever the big tribes went, they created the big kingdoms, and the entire northern India became the battleground for 16 great kingdoms. And one of the most powerful kingdom was Magad. What sort of question can be asked in the exam? Pay attention properly. There are 16 Mahajanpad, and question can fall basically in three categories. If that Mahajanpad is located in the present day, where will that Mahajanpad be located? What would be the capital of that Mahajanpad? And what are the important specifications of that Mahajanpad? The questions will fall under these three categories. I will give you a very small example. One of the Mahajanpad, Ang. Listen to me very carefully. Ang Mahajanpad. Ang Mahajanpad covers the region of Bihar and West Bengal. Its capital is Champa or Malini. Okay. Now, as per Mahabharata and Puranic literature, there was a king named as Sudab, and he had a queen named as Sudesna. Okay. There was a king named as Sudab and queen named as Sudesna. Initially, they did not had any son. Now they invited a sage whose name was Dhrigtamas, and he performed a yagna process for them. And the king and queen were blessed with 5 sons. The eldest son was named as Ang. That is why the kingdom is referred as Ang. As per Mahabharata, there is another story. Duryodhan gifted the region of Ang to one of the most powerful rulers of this region, that is Karna. Angaraj Karna. You might have heard this. Okay. Now, West Bengal is a coastal region. So the traders in this place or in the kingdom of Ang might have trading contact with the other places. Like it is said that the traders of Ang Mahajanpad had trading contacts with the traders of Swarna Bhumi, that is Thailand. There are cities like Ashapur and Bhadrika, which is located in Ang Mahajanpad, and Buddha has been said to deliver sermon or pravachan in the Ashapur. Now, what sort of questions can come up in the exam? Consider the following statement. The Mahajanpad of Ang is located in eastern part of India. First statement. The rulers of Ang Mahajanpad had trading contacts with the Swarnagiri. Which statement is correct? My friends, only statement number 1 is correct. Because I have said the traders had the trading contacts with Swarna Bhumi, that is Thailand, not Swarnagiri. Swarnagiri is Mysore, that is Karnataka. Getting the points? So we need to develop this sort of approach while studying the Mahajanpad. Hope so the points are clear, my friends. Okay? Now, listen to me very carefully. Mauryan dynasty, a very important chapter in the history of ancient India, and it plays a very crucial role in the exam. And lot many questions have been asked on the Mauryan dynasty in the exam continuously. Now pay attention properly. Magad was one of the most powerful Mahajanpad, and one dynasty was ruling over Magad, which was referred as Nanda dynasty. The last ruler of Nanda dynasty was Dhananand, and he was being dethroned by Chandragupta Maurya with the help of whom? Chanakya. Now it is said that Chandragupta Maurya in Greek or Latin literature is also mentioned as Sandrokotas or Androkotas. During his reign, a road was constructed from Patliputra to Takshashila, which had a midpoint at Varanasi. And Varanasi was known for trade in cotton textile and horses. Chandragupta Maurya is also referred as Great Road Builder. During his reign, Seleucus Nicator attacked India, and it is said that he lost the battle and he had to surrender four places to Chandragupta Maurya: Kabul, Kandahar, Herat, and Balochistan. And now it is said that Chandragupta Maurya appointed one special governor to take care of this northwest province. His name was Pushyagupta. In fact, it is said that Seleucus Nicator even married his daughter Helen to Chandragupta Maurya. And Chandragupta Maurya in return gave a gift of 500 elephants to Seleucus Nicator. There was an ambassador of Seleucus Nicator named as Megasthenes who adorned the court of Chandragupta Maurya. It is said that Chandragupta Maurya during the end of his reign accepted Jainism. And this has been mentioned in a Jain text called as Paristhiti Parvan. So this was about Chandragupta Maurya. Similar fashion, you guys need to study about Bindusar and also about Ashoka. Okay? Now it is said that Ashoka is considered as one of the most powerful ruler of the entire Mauryan Empire. It is believed that one event drastically changed Ashoka's life. That is Battle of Kaling, which occurred in 261 BC. More than 1 lakh person were killed and more than 1,50,000 were made as prisoners of war. Ashoka saw himself, he was completely anointed from head to toe in the blood. Now he said that if this is the way of winning over the people, I do not want to win over the people. Immediately he laid down his weapon and embraced Buddhism. He believed that it is not necessary to win over the people by war, Bheri Ghosh. We can also win over the people by love and peace. That is Dhamma Ghosh. And all these aspects have been mentioned in Ashoka's edict. Please read all the edicts of Ashoka. Time and again there have been questions in the prelims exam of UPSC. There are 14 major rock edicts and 7 minor rock edicts of Ashoka. Okay, I'll give you a very small example. Every human is my child has been mentioned in which rock edict of Ashoka? It has been mentioned in Major Rock Edict number 5 of Ashoka. The Battle of Kaling has been mentioned in which rock edict of Ashoka? It has been mentioned in Major Rock Edict number 13 of Ashoka. So please go through all the edicts. These edicts are very important from the exam perspective, and I have told you previously, time and again there have been questions on these rock edicts. Then there should be a proper focus on the Mauryan administration. I'll give you a very small example. Okay. Now there was a proper system of justice. There was a proper system of spies. Spies are referred as eyes and ear of the king. And there were spies like wandering spies. Like they used to wander from places to places. And they used to gather information and deliver this information to the king. Such spies are called as Sanchari. Okay. And there are spies who are bringing the information from within the kingdom itself and delivering the information to the king. Such spies are called as Sansthan. Excuse me. Please study all the entire administrative setup of the Mauryas. Because time and again there have been question on the administrative setup of the Mauryas. Kautilya's Arthashastra is very important. Megasthenes Indica is very important, and there have been a question in the exam about Megasthenes Indica. Now Megasthene was a Greek ambassador in the court of Chandragupta Maurya, and he gave a vivid description of Mauryan society. And there have been a question about Megasthenes Indica. So my friends, hope so you understood what approach we need to develop for Mauryan Empire. Okay guys, please read it properly, follow the NCERT, follow the Tamil Nadu State Board book, and follow certain reference books. Like you can also follow the book of Poonam Dalal Dahiya ma'am. It is a very good book. You can get a very wonderful perspective, a very targeted approach towards the prelims exam. Okay? See, which rock edict mention about Dhamma Mahamatra? So it is rock edict number 5. Okay? Then, which statement is true as per Megasthenes Indica? There was absence of slavery in India. There has been no famine in India so far. Both the statements are correct. Although the statements are wrong, okay, there was famine in India during the reign of Chandragupta Maurya. There was presence of slavery, but Megasthenes Indica mentions that there was absence of slavery. He mentions that there have been no famine in India so far. So here, both the statements are correct. So hope so my friends, you understood what perspective you need to develop for prelims exam for the Mauryan Empire. Is that fine guys? Moving further. Buddhism. Very important chapter from the exam perspective. Follow one concept here. SFC. I repeat, SFC. Story, fact and concept. Okay? I'll tell you a very small story. You can easily understand all the major concepts through this story. Otherwise, you will keep on memorizing what is Mahaparinirvan, what is Mahabhishkraman, what is Mahabhinishkraman, what is Nirvan. Okay, now listen to me very carefully. The original name of Buddha is Siddhartha. His father's name is Shuddhodhan and his mother's name is Mahamaya. Immediately after his birth, his mother died and he was raised up by his aunt Prajapati Gautami. At the age of 16, he was married to Yashodhara and had a son named as Rahul. At the age of 29, once he was driving down the town along with his charioteer, whose name was Channa, and horse, whose name was Kantak. He observed 4 things which drastically changed his life. First was old man bent with age. Second was sick man groaning with pain. Third was a corpse or a dead body. And fourth was sannyasi or vairagi. And he was very much attracted towards the sight of that sannyasi or ascetic. And after having conversation with him, he decided to renounce his worldly life. And at the age of 29, he renounced his worldly life. And this process in the history of Buddhism is referred as Mahabhinishkraman. After renouncing his worldly life, the first place he went was Rajgriha. Here he met King Bimbisar. From there he went on to Vaishali. Here he met 2 people, Alara Kalam and Udak, from whom he learned the techniques of meditation. And then he reached Bodh Gaya. At Bodh Gaya, he was offered rice milk for the first time by a farmer's daughter, whose name was Sujata. And he continuously meditated for 49 days on the banks of Niranjana or Falgu river under a peepal tree. And on the 49th day, he attained Nirvana, that is enlightenment. Then he delivered his first sermon at a place called as Sarnath near Varanasi in a deer park. And this process is called as Dharma Chakra Parivartan. At the age of 80, he died at a place called as Kushinagar or Pawa, which is located near Gorakhpur district of UP. And this process in the history of Buddhism is referred as Mahaparinirvan. After the death of Buddha, it is said that the Buddha's relics were being distributed among 8 royal families. and a stupa was constructed over it. So stupa symbolizes what? It symbolizes death of Buddha. It symbolizes the Mahaparinirvan process. So there can be a question. The process of renunciation is referred as A. Nirvan, B. Mahabhinishkraman, C. Mahaparinirvan, or D. Tathagat. It's B. Mahabhinishkraman. Did you get the points, my friends? There have been probable questions in the exam about Chaitya and Vihar and various Buddhist monasteries. I'll give you a very small example. Initially, the Buddhist monks used to live upon bhiksha or alms, and they used to wander from place to place for bhiksha. During the monsoon season, they used to stay in the caves. Now, these caves had a different structure. For example, you are entering into a cave. At the end of the cave, there is a statue of a Buddha or a what we say stupa. The person goes there, he prays in front of the stupa and the statue. He circumambulates that and he comes and sits in the center of that cave, which is referred as a prayer hall. That is Chaitya. And near the prayer hall, there are small cubical columns. That is residing place for monks. That is Vihar. With the passage of time, these Chaitya and Vihar became important centers of Buddhist learning, and they developed into various monasteries. Tabo Monastery, K Monastery, Tawang Monastery, Rumtek Monastery, and there was a question in the UPSC exam in the form of match the following. On one side there was a monastery and on the other side there was a location, match them. This was a question asked in the UPSC prelims exam. Then there is various mudras of Buddhism. Immediately after attaining enlightenment, Buddha performed Bhumi Sparsha Mudra. What is Bhumi Sparsha Mudra? That is, I have attained enlightenment. And what is the evidence for that? Mother Earth is the evidence for that. This is the significance of Bhumi Sparsha Mudra. Again, this question have been asked in the UPSC prelims exam. Are you getting the points? Dhyana Mudra, Vitarka Mudra, Vajra Mudra, Anjali Mudra. So please go through all the Buddhist mudras. Go through Four Noble Truth and Eightfold Path. Then there have been questions continuously in the exam about various schools of art, like Gandhar School of Art, Mathura School of Art, and Amravati School of Art. I'll give you a very small example. In Gandhar School of Art, Buddha's head is protruded, which simply signifies a lot of knowledge. Buddha has elongated ears, which simply signifies a noble family. Buddha has curly hairs. Buddha is sitting in Padmasana and in meditative posture. All the statue of Buddha is in red sandstone. There is a standing statue of Buddha from Gandhar School of Art at Bamiyan Caves in Afghanistan. All these are important features of Gandhar School of Art. And there can be a probable question in the prelims exam. Consider the following statement about Gandhar School of Art. So please prepare all the three schools of art: Gandhar School of Art, Mathura School of Art, and Amravati School of Art. Okay? Please study about the stupa structure, because the structure of stupa is quite different. Like stupa, there are concepts like stupa, anda, vedika, harmika, tabena, chhatra, toran. All these are architectural aspects associated with the stupa. Study all the important stupas, because there can be a question in the prelims exam similarly like the monasteries in the form of match the following: the stupa and their location. So please study that properly. Sect of Buddhism. Three major sects: Hinayan, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. Hinayan, I'll give you a very small example. Hinayan believe in original teachings of Buddha. They believe that Buddha was not a god. He was a normal human being like us. He has underwent through a certain process and then attained true knowledge or nirvana. The majority of the literature of Hinayan is in Pali language. Okay, so they do not believe in idol worship. So these are the features of Heenyan. Mahayana is exactly opposite to that. So there can be a probable question in the exam about these things. So sect of Buddhism, Buddhist council. Please study all the four Buddhist council. Please study the Buddhist literature. There can be a question on Buddhist literature, and specifically, please study the three Pitakas. I am repeating, please study three Pitakas from the prelims perspective. Okay? Sutta Pitaka, Vinay Pitak, and Abhidhamma Pitak. I repeat, Sutta Pitak, Vinay Pitak, and Abhidhamma Pitak. Hope so you understood what all things that we need to focus upon in Buddhism. And this chapter is very, very important from the exam perspective. Because time and again there have been questions on Buddhism and Jainism. Okay? Moving further, Jainism. Please study all the important Tirthankar. Study majorly about 23rd and 24th Tirthankar. 23rd Tirthankar is Parshavnath Ji and 24th Tirthankar is Vardhaman Mahavir Ji. 5 cardinal principles. Among this, the 5 cardinal principles are Satya, Ahimsa, Asteya, Aparigriha, and Brahmacharya. Only the last principle, Brahmacharya, was given by Vardhaman Mahavir. And the previous 4 principles were given by Parshavnath Ji, whose symbol is snake and is 23rd Tirthankar in Jainism. So please study all the principles in quite depth and detail. There can be a probable question in the exam about the 5 cardinal principles of Jainism. Okay? Then there is something called as 3 Ratnas of Jainism. Samyak Gyan, Samyak Darshan, Samyak Charit. Read them properly. 9 Tattvas of Jainism and Jain text. Okay? Like I have talked about one text, that is Paristhiti Parvan. Another important text is Vyakhya Prajapati. Okay? Then please go through all the Jain temples. There can be a question about the locations of the Jain temple. And there were 2 Jain councils that were being held. One was held at Patliputra and other was held at Vallabhi in Gujarat. So please read this Jain council. Both of them are very important from the exam perspective. Go through all the post-Mauryan dynasties like Shungas, Kanvas, Satvahan, Shakas and Kushan. Please go through the administration of Satvahan. Okay? Because there can be a question on the administration of Satvahans. Okay? Please read Kushan properly, and majorly in Kushan you have to read about whom? Kanishk. Because the 4th Buddhist council was being patronized by Kanishk. Kanishk was also patronizer of Gandhar school of art and Mathura school of art. He was also one of the most important imperialist, that is conqueror. So apart from an imperialist, he will also patronize art and literature. So focus majorly on Kushan and Satvahan dynasty. There can be a question on the administration of Satvahan dynasty. Please read Satvahan dynasty properly. Okay guys? Then comes Sangam age. In Sangam age, you have to focus on 3 major kingdoms, that is Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas. You have to focus on 3 Sangam council. Among them, the 3rd council is the most important one. Like Ashtadhyayi, it is a book on Sanskrit grammar. Similarly, Tolkapiyam, it is a book on Tamil grammar. There was a direct question in the UPSC prelims exam. What is Tolkapiyam? So Tolkapiyam is nothing but a book on Tamil grammar. Okay? Shilpadikaram, Mani Meglai, Shivaga Chindamani, all these are epics, important epics of Sangam age. Please read the Sangam administration properly, because there can be a probable question on the Sangam administration. And please read all the Sangam themes, like what is Palai, what is Niyatal. Okay? All these themes are very important. There are 5 Sangam themes. Focus on all the Sangam themes. Okay? Sangam dynasty is very important from the exam perspective. And what all things that you guys need to read in Chola, Cheras and Pandya? Where is the kingdom located? What is the capital of that kingdom? What is the symbol of that kingdom? Okay. What are the important ports of that kingdom? And what are the important rulers of that kingdom? You need to focus majorly on these 5 parameters while reading the Cholas, Cheras and the Pandyas. Got the points, my friends? Gupta rulers. Okay. In the Gupta rulers, again like the Mauryan Empire, you need to focus majorly on all the Gupta rulers. Specifically, you need to focus on Samudragupta, who is referred as Napoleon of India because of his policies of conquest. So you need to read all the Gupta rulers properly. Apart from that, you also need to focus on Gupta administration because Gupta administration is very vivid and dynamic like the Mauryan administration. There can be a probable question in the prelims exam about the comparative analysis of the Gupta administration and Mauryan administration. Literature is important, specifically Kalidas, like Ritu Samhar, Meghdut. These are the poems written by Kalidas. Okay, there are various dramas like Abhijanana Shakuntalam, Malvika Agnimitram. All these are dedicated to Kalidas. So please also go through other what we say laureates of that time like Dandin, Bhasa and many more. So please focus on the literature part as well. Focus on temple architecture because Gupta age is also known as golden age for temple architecture in India. And Nagara style of architecture that was prevalent in northern part of India cropped up during the Gupta age. And now there were various technical aspects that came here. Like there was a direct question in the prelims exam, what is Panchayatan? Now what will we think? Panchayatan probably might be a village assembly because Panchayat. So what is Panchayatan? It is nothing but a style of temple architecture. Such a beautiful question that was asked by UPSC, and this Panchayatan has directly been mentioned in the NCERT. So please read the Gupta age from the NCERT and from the Tamil Nadu State Board book. Just I have talked about which among the following works are dedicated to Kalidas. So such sort of question can be asked in the exam. So answer here is basically Meghdut is dedicated to Kalidas. Swapna Vasav Dutt is related to Bhasa. Okay? And post Guptas, here majorly you need to focus on Harshvardhan. There was a question in the last year's prelims exam itself about Harshvardhan. Chalukyas of Badami and Pallavas of Kanchi. One more aspect that you need to focus upon here is Vakatakas, who were ruling in the region of Deccan, who had replaced the rulers of Satwahan. Okay guys? So this is the major aspect that you need to focus on in the prelims exam from ancient Indian perspective. Please go through the old NCERT and the new NCERT. Please go through 11th standard Tamil Nadu State Board book because everything about the ancient India is given in a very comprehensive manner. Okay? And apart from that, please go through 10 to 15 years past 10 to 15 years question, so that you can come to know actually that what sort of question or what inclination UPSC is having about the ancient India. These are the important topics that you need to focus upon in the ancient India. Hope so. The session was informative and it will give you a right direction or a right approach for ancient India. Okay guys, it was very wonderful session and it was very nice interacting with you guys. Thank you and have a very nice day. Bye bye.